Hi, I'm Rosenberg. Welcome to my latest YouTube video and podcast. Today I'm going to talk about a subject that is interwoven in the fabric of the human magnet syndrome content. It's called trauma bonding. Trauma bonding means a little bit to a lot of people. It has different definitions depending on your profession, your point of view. Are you one partner versus the other? It has different points of view depending on theory and background, whether you're talking about sex addiction, codependency. I'm going to talk to you about it as it relates to relationships or with people who have self-love deficit disorder and pathological narcissists. For those of you who are familiar with my work, you've read my Human Magnet Syndrome book or my Codependency Revolution book. In both books, I detail the magnetic relationship between opposite personality types, where the codependent or the person with self-love deficit disorder feels strangely attracted to, comfortable, and paradoxically safe with a pathological narcissist, and the same with a pathological narcissist. They feel strangely attracted to, comfortable, and safe. And I describe that in detail in both books and many, many YouTube videos. So let's accept a couple facts here so I can build upon the foundation of this discussion. Codependents are always attracted to narcissists because there is this opposite or inverse attraction. They are naturally caregivers, sacrificers. They are naturally intuitive. They are thoughtful, empathetic. They think often before they say anything. Their point of view is often helpful, reconciliatory. They are sacrificial. They are, in many terms, very nice to others, but not so nice to themselves. Self-love deficit disorder. They find comfort in relationships where they can just be themselves, where they can listen, where they don't have to make a decision on important events, but go with the flow. They feel comfortable when someone is in charge. Now, feeling comfortable, just to be clear, doesn't always mean feeling good. Codependents naturally, reflexively defer to others. They don't push their opinion if other people have stronger opinions and are more reactive. So it's not as if they enjoy it. It's more of a reflexive personality trait that goes all the way back to its origins, which is the attachment trauma experience when they were a child and was raised by a narcissistic and codependent parent. The origins of codependency or self-love deficit disorder is specified and analyzed and discussed in my books and other YouTube videos. I suggest that you look at the video. It's an animated video that talks about my self-love deficit disorder pyramid. A link will be here. Codependents are naturally comfortable. They're sacrificing, giving, they're altruistic points of view, positions. Conversely, or inversely, which is the opposite, narcissists are naturally comfortable being the center of attention, to be the one who commands people's respect, attention, the one that is able to get people to be interested in them, to notice them. They are naturally comfortable when they have an audience and they have someone that can look to them and see the great person that they believe they are, but unfortunately are unable to really access the shame that is below the narcissistic personality disorder. So the narcissists naturally want to be the center of the attention. They want someone to love them, like them, be attracted to them because of their bravado, their strength, their sensuality, sexuality, their candor, their opinions, their assertiveness. All of those descriptions aren't necessarily narcissistic. They describe the narcissist's needs. And what makes them feel comfortable in relationships is when they can find someone who naturally enjoys, appreciates, prefers their personality type over someone who is more focused on the other person's needs, more neutral, more giving, more loving, more respecting, more caring. So there we have the opposite personality traits interacting in this attraction dynamic like a magnet, a positive magnet and a negative magnet, opposites. They pull each other together. That is the basic human magnet syndrome theory. But this video and podcast is not about the human magnet syndrome. It's about trauma bonding. How can someone bond if there's trauma being experienced? If you are healthy and a person is harming you, they're harming you through action, what they are doing, which could be any form of verbal, physical, sexual, psychological abuse, and then it can be done in inaction, like abandonment, neglect, deprivation. Trauma is a very subjective term. And I've spent a lot of time talking about this, especially in my Hitch video. It's a 6-hour educational video where I go deep into what trauma is and how I solve that problem in my self-love recovery treatment program. More information can be seen right here. So trauma is the connection between the narcissist and the codependent. The codependent takes control eventually over time, this intense love, attraction of these opposite but inversely connecting personality types. They love and enjoy the control. But in the beginning, there is this love cloud. It is the walking on air. I can't sleep, I can't eat feeling that they both are experiencing. Almost always a narcissist and the codependent, should everything match up and they feel like they have met their one and only, and I quote this, their soulmate, there is this feeling of what is called Limrance. Limrance is a term by Dorothy Tenoff. As I said just a few minutes ago, it's unbelievable, euphoric. It's almost like a high or it's a drug. Just to be clear, Limrance is an experience that we all feel. Healthy people who are self-love abundant, who don't have self-love deficit disorder or a personality disorder such as narcissistic personality disorder. Limrance is deeply connected to humanity, where other animals who don't have the thought processes, the intellect, the ability to analyze the sense of self that is unique to the human beings, they don't have that conscious experience of falling in love. Now, I can't tell you exactly what it's like for a whale or a dog, but let's just assume humans experience this intense emotional, cognitively active thinking, thoughts, experience of intense joy, satisfaction, and what people will call love. And I quote the word love. Invariably, the codependent, because of the matching of opposite personality traits and that dance concept that I've been talking about for the last 12 years, the two tango dancers, the leader and the follower. The leader is direct, aggressive, assertive, takes command, and the follower is intuitive, reactive, and knows when to move and how to move just by feelings of intuition. The tango dance represents another analogy or metaphor of the human magnet syndrome. So the narcissist and codependent meet and they have this explosion of love, this soulmate experience, but invariably, always, it will devolve into a negative experience for the codependent or the SLD, the person with self-love deficit disorder. They will then become victim to the narcissist's harm, abuse, neglect, deprivation, gaslighting, any forms of manipulation. And not only will they become a victim to this, in a sense, participate in it. It is not their fault that they're being hurt. No one, never do I blame anyone for being abused. Let's just be clear. There is no excuses to abuse anyone, and codependents are never at fault for being abused. But they participate in it because they choose the person with whom they're going to have a relationship with. They stay in that relationship when they know it's not good. And if there are people connected to them, say their children, the children suffer. I don't blame codependents or SLDs for this because I know we are naturally prone to feeling shame. I just hold us responsible for the problem so that we can navigate ourselves out of it. There's one thing about walking away from a narcissist, breaking up, divorcing someone, stopping it. Well, that's a good thing. And it's unlikely with codependents because of trauma bonding, which we're going to be talking about in just a few minutes. But codependents cannot break free. They don't want to. As much as they are being manipulated, they are choosing to be in a relationship. Now, that's an important distinction because if someone is going to solve the problem, solve their self-love deficit disorder, come to see me for my treatment, I call it my self-love recovery treatment, or someone else, you can't solve a problem if you blame everyone for everything. There are certain problems that are just fundamentally the fault of another person. For rape, for example, there's no excuse for that. A person does not participate in it and take on responsibility for that. Sexual abuse, there are so many things that simply are one-dimensional. They're just bad and dysfunctional, and the perpetrator of it deserves complete blame. But the codependent narcissist relationship is the interaction of two opposite but emotionally compatible people. And the compatibility part is a quantitative term, not qualitative term. And what I mean by that is they're compatible because of how the caregiving and the patience fits in with the selfishness and the entitlement. It fits together. it doesn't mean it feels good. That would be qualitative. If you feel stuck in painful relationship patterns, you're not alone. I've already helped thousands break free from what I call self-love deficit disorder and how to finally choose self-love over the insanity you create for yourselves. Work with me. My psychotherapy can help. Most all SLDs are in relationships with pathological narcissists. Take that to the bank. By now, it's a fact. I've been talking about this for nearly 17 years, and there's no dispute about it. And because they're in these relationships, initially felt the connection, the limerence, the chemistry, and then it devolved into the true color, the true nature of the narcissist. And they could be the bully, they can be the passive-aggressive person, they can be the covert narcissist, they can be the malignant narcissist, they can have borderline personality disorder, they can have antisocial personality disorder, or be a sociopath. Those are all of the disorders of what I call pathological narcissism. So what we have is we have a codependent in a relationship with a narcissist. And that relationship starts off wonderfully and beautifully for the codependent, and it devolves, and the codependent is unhappy. They're not getting what they once thought they were going to get. They're being treated differently than they were in the beginning, but still they hang into this relationship like it's oxygen. Like if they're without it, they're going to be in pain. And that pain that I talk about is the expectation for pathological loneliness, which is the number one reason why codependents get into relationships and stay in it, because outside of that, they feel so intensely, painfully, bone-achingly lonely. And I talk about this in other videos, and I explain how SLDD or codependency is like an addiction, and pathological loneliness is the number one withdrawal symptom. So we have the codependent, the SLD, and the narcissist in a relationship. The SLD is not happy anymore, or they are now intermittently unhappy, or more unhappy than happy, but they stay in a relationship. They fear being pathologically lonely. They fear a connection to this existential crisis of believing that they're never going to be loved by anyone. Call that core shame. So they stay. The narcissist stays because he or she is getting what they want. They get to be the center of the attention and not be accountable. It's a win-win for them. So this trauma bonding is the bonding of the victim and the perpetrator, a bonding that feels like it's something other than hurt, pain, or suffering. Yes, it is not good. It is not experienced with pleasure. It's experienced with hope. It's experienced with almost a delusional sense of hope, this magical type of thinking that the narcissist one day will love them like they did in the beginning, or what they dreamed that he or she can do. They are bonded to a person that historically has been abusing them. And through the abuse, they have suffered trauma. They are bonded to the trauma not because it feels good to them. Now, there are cases where people are sadists, masochists, and they just have a thing for pain. I might talk about that in another video. Codependents or SLDs are not masochists. They don't stay in this relationship because they enjoy being traumatized, but it feels familiar to them. They can expect it. There are few times in which they worry that they're going to be alone. As long as they're in this relationship in which a part of them, their delusional self, feels loved, and the narcissist pretends to say they love them, or actually does, just doesn't realize it's not what most people consider healthy love. They endure the trauma. They endure the abuse. They are bonded to a person who is inherently, reflexively, and predictably harmful to them, who causes them trauma. Or if this is a family where we have children, the children also. Another way of looking at trauma bonding is this feeling of normality, is a feeling of predictability, of familiarity. SLDs, codependents, all come from a childhood in which they experienced attachment trauma, which created the core shame, the pathological loneliness, and the addiction to stay with a narcissist, because the idea of being without it, they'd have to deal with the existential pain, the loneliness, and the shame. This process does not happen consciously, but I promise you, the attraction and the willingness and the need to stay in a traumatic, a harmful, and abusive relationship is rooted in their experience as a child. If you think about it, we learn about the world, we learn about people and how people are and how people react to us, whether it's our mother, our father, our neighbor, people in school. We learn about the world and our place in it through our attachment experience. If we are born and raised with healthy, and to me, healthy is a relative term. That can mean you go to therapy and you have difficulties and some self-esteem issues, but still love yourself, and you're neither a narcissist or a codependent. But if we have healthy parents, they nurture us, and they protect us, they teach us not only directly, but indirectly through observation, through the processing of our experiences. Children can have a negative experience. The parent could talk to the child about that, and that becomes a time in their life where they understand something that without that experience, they would not have figured it out or learned a lesson. So with healthy parents, a child learns about who they are, and they learn about their worth, and they learn about why it is important for some people to be in a relationship with them, because there's something about them that is lovable, sweet, kind, whatever a unique person's self-esteem or self-concept. And they also learn that there are consequences, and they learn that not everyone likes them, but at the end of the day, they get to choose who they can be in a relationship with. And if someone's not nice to them, they can end that relationship, or they can set boundaries with hopes of changing that person and bettering the relationship. A child born to healthy parents who was protected and nurtured during their attachment years comes out of it with this instinctive, reflexive idea of what they deserve and what they don't deserve. They come out of their childhood with this automatic, reflexive reaction to people treating them badly and ending relationships, setting limits on relationships, boundaries, or anything that is about them standing up for themselves and protecting themselves. Their experiences with that are positive. Someone hurts them, they set boundaries, that person doesn't stop, they end a relationship, and they learn that they are worthwhile and don't have to subject themselves to abuse. The child who comes from a pathologically narcissistic parent, someone with narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, or who is a sociopath, they're abused, they're neglected, they're deprived. Their narcissistic parent is not nice to them, even if they are the chosen, the trophy child, the favorite child. They still had to mold themselves into the type of personality that their parent wanted, loves, prefers, so that would mitigate and lessen the harm. So one could argue that this child who's going to become a codependent adult because he or she learned all about relationships as just a little human being, where they learn that if they can just somehow make another person love them and change just enough, that they will get this love or attention or kindness. That does make a difference when compared to the children who can't do that, who are the object of the abuse, who the narcissist projects their fury and their anger and their unconsciously buried self-hate. Those children have a completely different attachment experience. But the child who's going to be a codependent, the trauma they experience is the trauma of indifference, the trauma of having parents or a parent who sees them as invisible, who sees them for only what they can do, only what they cannot do in order to make the narcissistic parent happy, or to somehow defer their sadness or anger or their disappointment. And they are molded into this trophy child. That is huge trauma. And when we compare the child who's going to have a personality disorder, because narcissists come from the same parents who create the adult codependent or the adult child with self-love deficit disorder. In any family in which one person is a codependent who has self-love deficit disorder, the probability is extremely high that another sibling has a personality disorder. I talk about this in my Human Magnet Syndrome book and my Codependency Revolution book. So the trauma they experience is hugely different. Just because they're not the object of the narcissist's hate, just because they're not considered the bad child, the bad seed, the problem child, the disappointment, just because they're not physically, verbally abused more, does not mean the trauma that they're experiencing is any less harmful and painful. Codependents or SLDs know this. And if you're listening or watching, you know all about this. Being invisible, not having anyone know who you really are, having to mold yourself to what everyone else wants just to get love or what you think is love or attention. It's painful. It's saddening. It's hugely disappointing. It's traumatic, but it's more traumatic for a child because children should be nurtured and loved and protected as they are the center of the universe. The child who has healthy parents is taken care of. Even in bad times, they feel safe. And if they're bad or they're in trouble or they get bad grades in school or they're caught lying or whatever normal kids do during their developmental process in order to find their own identity, they know that their parents are always going to love them even if they're mad. Well, the codependents, they walk this very fine line. As children, they have to make sure that they do everything right or somehow mitigate, stop, or catch anything potentially that could upset the narcissistic parent. Doing that for the whole time of their attachment experience, from birth to, let's go all the way up into later adolescence. It's to endure trauma that rips apart your personality, steals your dreams, takes away any form of self-esteem. That's trauma.
If you feel stuck in painful relationship patterns, you're not alone. I've already helped thousands break free from what I call self-love deficit disorder and how to finally choose self-love over the insanity you create for yourselves. Work with me. My psychotherapy can help.
The narcissist, on the other hand, their background was created by trauma also. As I said a few minutes ago, the child who's to become a narcissist is born in a cesspool of deep, unmitigating trauma. They're beaten down worse than codependent, or than the child who is going to eventually become codependent, because they don't get a chance to figure out how to be their parents' perfect child, trophy child. They don't learn how to do that. They are crushed before that happens, or there's just something about them that makes them naturally unattractive to their parent. I know that sounds horrible. Unappealing to their parent. Some of these children are just naturally triggering from the narcissist so that their very essence makes the narcissist not like them. And that trauma is beyond the scope of the type of trauma that the child who's going to be the future codependent experiences. And that trauma is so big, it is so extensive, it gets cordoned off, it gets put into a leaden vault and put away in the deepest recesses of a person's limbic system, part of the brain, specifically in their amygdala. The child who's going to be codependent, their attachment trauma is similarly sequestered, taken offline, and put into the limbic system so it's not remembered. The difference is that a narcissist will not remember what happened to them. The brain won't allow that. To bring back such suffering into conscious memory, according to the brain's subjective experience, is too much for it, and it keeps it buried forever. The codependent, the SLD, especially if they're in treatment with me, they can get to it. They just need a therapist who understands attachment trauma, its invisible nature, and if they have a technique similar to my Healing the Inner Trauma Child trauma integration technique, or my Hitch technique, I have a video connected to that, and you can check that out here. The therapist can help the codependent connect to that trauma, connect to their bigger than life feeling of being crushed and forgotten or never known. They can help them get to the roots of that, get to that little child inside of them, what I call the inner trauma child, help that child speak to the adult that they became, and then integrate that to their conscious understanding of who they are, and through therapy, overcome it. That's the most simplest way that I can explain what I do with my trauma victims, my SLDs, when I access that trauma through the Healing the Inner Trauma Child or the Hitch method. So both the narcissist and the codependent bring their trauma into the relationship. There is a bonding based upon trauma. So my version of trauma bonding goes beyond the standard definition, which is a codependent or the victim of trauma habituating to the trauma, getting used to it, somehow being shaped or through some form of behavior modification or learning, find themselves taking in these personality traits and being comfortable with them. The codependent, when they meet a narcissist, they are not looking for someone who's going to abuse them. They are just looking to be in love. They are looking to vanquish their loneliness and their core shame. And should they meet the narcissist through the human magnet syndrome dance and fall in love, at least temporarily, and experience Limrance, it is an interaction of trauma. The trauma that caused the codependency, the self-love deficit disorder, is interacting with the trauma that caused the pathological narcissism. The narcissist who, let's say, has NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, they naturally are going to fall in love with someone that finally loves them, finally gives them the attention and the adoration that they always wanted, and we're talking about their childhood. So we have the attachment trauma bonding the two. It is a relationship dynamic that is behind the scenes. It's offline. There is this pull, this magnetism that brings these two trauma experiences together and makes each of the two people feel like they are matched in a relationship that is from heaven, that's beautiful, that's just wonderful. And we know how that turns out. The soulmate eventually becomes a cellmate, as my dad used to say. So the trauma bond is what came before the relationship, and specifically in their attachment experiences, their childhood, manifesting in the behind-the-scenes, unconscious, and reflexive attraction and the beginning of the relationship. The trauma bonding also is seen in how the SLD responds to the ongoing abuse or trauma of the narcissist. This is more of a conscious experience, but it's still connected to the unconscious or offline trauma that is sequestered back in their amygdala that the SLD can't really get to, at least not without someone's help. When given a chance to leave the relationship, if they have a way out, the way the SLD processes that moment, that situation, they ask themselves, is it any better to be alone by myself than being in this relationship? They fool themselves. They trick themselves to believe that it is better for them to stay in a relationship where they know what's going to happen. They're saying, keep your enemies close. They can predict it. And if they can predict it, they can find ways in how to overcome it psychologically, which usually is to deny it, to disassociate from it, to numb out to it, to just get used to it. That trauma is part of the bonding experience. They feel loved by the person that hurts them the most. They forgive that person because the very center of their personality was formed as a child. That is the core of love, is a person who loves me. In the mind of the codependent, is a person that does not pay attention to my needs, who I have to love. And if I somehow can just figure out the way to make them happy, then I feel safe. Well, that trauma bonding is the glue of this relationship. It is the belief that they are lovable and that they can get at least some bit of safety out of this relationship. Because if they should get out of it, all that they can imagine is darkness and loneliness and not being loved and the childhood-based fears of being nothing. So when we look at trauma bonding, I'm suggesting that we go a lot deeper than just what the codependent or the victim of the trauma experiences. Go beyond the habituation to the trauma, somehow transformation of a negative experience into an experience that is acceptable. And in a lot of cases, that is a part of what is, and I quote this, love. Trauma bonding runs deep, and trauma bonding can't be solved just through a conversation with a psychotherapist on what is going on now. It has to get to the roots of it. It has to somehow connect the trauma bonding experience in the here and now with the trauma experience when they were younger. And if you can make those connections and somehow get to the affective or emotional content that has been taken offline, that is disassociated, if you can do that, then there's healing. And that type of healing changes that human magnet syndrome feeling of familiarity. Once you love yourself, you have self-love abundance, your broken picker becomes fixed, and you naturally, intuitively, instinctively choose a healthy person over someone that's not. I hope this video was helpful. If you would like more information, please don't hesitate to email me at help@selfloverecovery.com. Go to our website at selfloverecovery.com and take a look at what I have to offer and how I potentially can help you. Also, consider joining our Patreon subscription program. This is content that is exclusive only to the subscriber. And depending on the subscription program that you choose, you can get information that is no one else gets to see, or an advanced peek at information that is going to be coming out later. So thank you very much for taking your time and listening to what I have to say. I hope it was helpful. And I wish you the very best, and be healthy, love yourself, and just keep this process going of learning, progressing, and evolving to the best person you possibly can be. You take care. Bye-bye.
If you feel stuck in painful relationship patterns, you're not alone. I've already helped thousands break free from what I call self-love deficit disorder and how to finally choose self-love over the insanity you create for yourselves. Work with me. My psychotherapy can help.